Hello and welcome to another episode of our Experts of the Americas series. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Tonni Brodber. She's the representative of the UN Women Multi-Country Office Caribbean. She has vast experience in gender issues as well as in the Caribbean region, and I'm delighted to have her join us for this episode, this special episode, to announce this partnership that we now have with UN Women Caribbean Office. Welcome, Tonni. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Valentina. It's my pleasure to be here.
Tonni, let's just go right in. And I think it would be great to start off this conversation by painting the picture of the conditions affecting women in the Caribbean, both in terms of the biggest challenges ahead, as well as the successes that have been achieved. The Caribbean presents both worrying indicators on gender-based violence, but for example, has had some success in electing female leaders. Against this backdrop, what are some of the biggest challenges facing women in the Caribbean, and how do they differ by sub-region or country? And on the contrary, how have governments successfully addressed challenges regarding gender-based violence, political participation, or economic empowerment?
Sure. So let's start off with the situation in the Caribbean. You're absolutely correct. There's so many successes that we have been able to attain as it pertains to gender equality and women's empowerment, whether it be from the fact that the first woman elected in the Caribbean was actually elected to political leadership, the heights of political leaderships in the 1980s in Dominica, to the fantastic Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados today. And we also had a woman Prime Minister in Trinidad and Tobago. So we have a woman Prime Minister right now as well in Aruba. We are a country that acknowledges women's power in terms of their capacity to lead. However, we see women not only being able to lead at the heights of leadership, not at the levels we'd want, but also in Parliament and in our public administration and in middle management. We have made incredible gains. Women are leading when it comes to tertiary level education as well in our region. We have made gains that do not detract from the gains that still need to be made. We are a region in which unpaid care work, like across the world, is still not effectively recognized. The unpaid care burden falls for the most part on women still, and that increased 2 times as much during the pandemic. And before that, it was 3 times as much responsibility on women than it was on men. And what this means is that women are not fully engaged in the economy, formal economy, in the way in which they could be. So we need to make certain strides as it pertains to different policies and programs that can reduce that unpaid care responsibility that many women face, and also allow for opportunities for women to transform their certification into a contribution in our economy. Labor rate participations are still lower for women across the Caribbean sub-region. Finally, that violence against women and girls, it's not unique to the Caribbean, but we have enough within our space to reduce the numbers that range from 55% of women who've ever been in a relationship in one territory and country to 39% in another, when we have prevalence for how women are experiencing violence if they've ever been in a relationship. That's too much. 1 in 3 and 1 in 2. We need to work on those issues. And these issues are linked to the broader priorities Caribbean governments have identified around citizen security and crime reduction, growth, and debt reduction. When we have more people engaged in the economy peacefully and safely, then we're able to be as productive as possible. What the countries have been doing to address violence against women and girls must be lauded. For example, in Trinidad and Tobago, increased investment has been made by the government to not only strengthen their prevention and response mechanisms, but to be innovative in the way in which they do so. And I invite your viewership to go on their website, to go on our website to learn more. The government of Jamaica as well has expanded the number of government-run shelters, have ensured that their police, like the police in Trinidad and Tobago, have access to the training required to effectively manage gender-based violence cases. And the government of Guyana has gone into the hinterland regions to ensure that faith-based organizations, young people, civil society have the tools they need to really promote positive social norms when it comes to gender equality and conflict resolution.
Tonni, I think that you pointed to a specific question that I had about how have some governments worked with civil society leaders as well as the private sector in the past to address gender-based violence, to encourage political participation, as well as to improve women's economic empowerment. How might these be lessons learned for other Caribbean governments too?
So the government of Grenada has been a leader in working with civil society, the Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic, for example, to find alternative means of rehabilitation for perpetrators of violence against women and girls. Rather than incarceration, which is not the only means of rehabilitation, and we have seen so many flaws within that system, we have a program that's been running for over 15 years in Grenada between the government and civil society, where persons who go before the magistracy for first-time offensive around battery of their spouse or partner goes to a 16-week behavioral change program called Man to Man, based on the Partnership for Peace program that UN Women adopted in the region. This program has an extremely low recidivism rate, and men in their own voices have said that this program has allowed them to have self-control in all aspects of their life. That is a key partnership between civil society and the government that delivers a service that's required to rehabilitate human beings who are just making choices with the tools that they have to make better choices with better tools.
And how has UN Women in this sense played a role?
Well, the program is UN Women's program. It's a program that we adopted from Canada. We thought it's important that we have opportunities for rehabilitation that do not only include incarceration. We brought together the experts that adapted the program to the Caribbean perspective. We supported the training of the experts and the facilitators that do the work directly in terms of implementing that training. And we've provided the funding to keep the training going. But beyond that, we have supported the government of Grenada with gender-responsive budgeting so that the program can continue without our direct investment.
And then I had a question particularly related to something that we've been discussing in past conversations. You have mentioned, and we know as the Atlantic Council, the importance of, having a multiplicity of perspectives when focusing on an issue, and the problem and the issue with gender-based violence, for example, as well as other issues related to gender are also key to have this multitude of perspectives. Can you elaborate a bit about the added value of addressing gender issues by incorporating both traditional and non-traditional stakeholders, and this from government to private sector to CSOs to men? Why is it so crucial?
Well, this is an all-of-community problem that requires an all-of-community response. My husband often tells me, you can't end gender-based violence by trying to end gender-based violence. And I laugh and I said, well, of course, you need to have economic empowerment actions. You need to have economic empowerment actions, not just for women, but also for men. One of the risk factors for increased violence in a relationship is stress. When you have economic insecurity, that heightens stress. You need to be working with our colleagues, for example, at PAHO and WHO. Mental health is a critical aspect of being able to maintain and manage your stress effectively. We need to work with our colleagues at UNFPA, because a woman having an opportunity to make choices about when she has sex and who she has sex with is also critical in terms of being a risk factor for violence. We found that women who were initiated into sexual activity at a young age were at a higher risk of being in partnerships that were violent throughout the rest of their life. And in some countries, unfortunately, pregnancy was also a risk factor for increased violence. So making sure women know how to protect themselves, how that women and men understand that sexual relationships come with a responsibility that goes beyond a moment and an attraction, but that can really manifest in a life that requires both of you to be kind and considerate of one another in raising this life that may be a product of your engagement. Also, the private sector. We did an economic cost of violence study in Jamaica, and colleagues can find that study on our website, caribbean.unwomen.org. And the cost of violence against women to the private sector is enormous. Lost days, lost productivity. So really getting the private sector on board through programs and tools like the Women's Empowerment Principles has been one way in which we support the private sector in creating an enabling environment so that women, men, any survivor of violence and perpetrators can get the support and assistance they need, not be afraid that they'll lose their job, but understand that your life doesn't end when you walk in. Your personal life does not suddenly end when you walk into your office. You are who you are wherever you are. And an office space should be one that enables people to safely work effectively.
And it is with this in mind, both the challenges and the opportunities that we see that are impacting women across the Caribbean, that UN Women has decided to partner with the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center of the Atlantic Council for this project that seeks to facilitate a deeper understanding of social norms around gender in the Caribbean, build momentum and secure buy-in from relevant stakeholders across sectors and regions around this issue, and to generate concrete policy recommendations with a gender-based approach for the Caribbean region. Tonni, we are excited about this upcoming project, and I would love to end this conversation by asking you what excites you the most about this upcoming partnership and project with the Atlantic Council, and what do you hope that we can accomplish?
There's so much that excites me about this. What excites me the most? First, I want to thank Patricia Francis, because Patricia Francis is a woman who sees opportunity in so many spaces and always creates opportunities for others. And this partnership would not have been possible without her first introducing us to each other's work and impact. What I like about the Atlantic Council is the way in which you're able to engage with parliaments in a way that is not in any way fractious. You are able to engage with parliaments in a way that is based on advocacy and fact, that is really a meeting of minds. We may not always agree on everything, but just listen. Let's have a convening to hear one another. And our civil society has done incredible work in the Caribbean. We're small island states, and sometimes the relationships can be more fractious than they need to be. And the passion that fuels our civil society, which we need, sometimes translate into what some of our policymakers feel is too much aggression. I feel a strengthened relationship and a strengthened advocacy engagement between our civil society and policymakers, in the same way in which the Atlantic Council has been able to do this, not only in the United States, but across Latin America. The Caribbean can absolutely benefit from that, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the way in which you use social media tools to get the messages exactly where they need to be. Fact, evidence-based messages. And I think both our policymakers and our civil society will be able to benefit from that. There's so much learning that we have from one another that we can benefit from, that the Caribbean civil society colleagues can share with the Atlantic Council, and that the Atlantic Council can share with Caribbean civil society. And that is probably what I am looking forward to most.
I'm beyond excited with this partnership, for this exchange that we're going to get to experience. Thank you, Tonni, so much for the partnership, for taking the time to talk to me today. And thank you, everyone, for listening and for watching us. I will see you next time.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you in person as well.
Always.